welcome to another edition of Rugby Saturday Southwest. I'm your host, Ed Nunez, along with my co-host, Aaron Rivera. And Aaron, 2 weeks ago we were in Tucson, and, I tell you what, I had a great time. We talked about it. The tournament was at the Keno Sports Complex in Tucson, Arizona, and it was a complex. I'll tell you what, as somebody that's worked in city facilities mostly all my life, this was a city facility from the city of Tucson. I was very impressed. I know that they had built that to attract a AAA baseball team, and that didn't work out. But, the rugby that we saw was on another. Again, ProView Network, special thanks to Steve Davis, Marty Watts. Tell you what, man, at the end of it, we were pretty zipped. We were pretty zipped. But I'll tell you, the complex itself, I was like, the first thing I think is, gosh, they're selling alcohol. That's great. That's great. I was just thinking, why can't Albuquerque have, not sell alcohol so much, but why can't we have a sports complex like the Keno? I always think what ifs.
Yeah, and one of the things about it, that you're mentioning, the field I was on was a baseball field that they converted around for the rugby, and then you were on a soccer field, and we had another soccer field going on. So it was a really versatile stadium that they were using for that, and all the grass was beautiful. I mean, the second I walked up, I walked onto the field and just started feeling that grass, and it was like, ooh.
You know what? I'm a big grass guy. My dad and I, when I was younger, that's where I made some extra money, was by mowing lawns. I've got a nice lawn in my backyard. So when I saw that, I'm thinking, how do they grow this? It doesn't look dry in any patches at all.
And it's in Tucson, Arizona.
Right. And you know what? They were watering when we left on Sunday at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so I thought, where's the water? But we're not in Albuquerque.
No,
but I'll tell you what, impressive, man. I was impressed by the facility, a little jealous because I love Albuquerque with all my heart and soul. And I think, gosh, when are we going to, I always think that. I know you do too. You're kind of young, but you think ahead, big picture. Anyway, going to back to the rugby, we saw, just some incredible rugby. We mentioned, the Austin Blacks, the Seattle Saracens. We'll go over some scores here. Orange County, Napa Valley Wine Thieves. Again, and then we got to meet them, some of them at the hotel. Got to interact with them. And you were getting a lot of shout-outs, and I think this needs to be mentioned. We had viewers as far away as Denmark and Napa Valley and San Francisco. And when I was seeing that, I was like, wow, I've done basketball, football, baseball, and I love doing those. But rugby has an incredible international following.
That's one of the big advantages of it. Rugby is an international sport. It's the fastest growing sport internationally right now. So, the potential audience is huge for that. And especially with the U.S. having such great athletes, we always are very competitive in the Olympics and international games. So, if we can grow that field here in the U.S., then it'll be pretty good. But, one thing that with the growing of it, we've got some great teams growing here locally. Like in the tournaments that we saw the Seattle Saracens, who defended their title there for the women's D1.
We've got some scores. I don't know if Josh can put them up for us, but we got some scores from out there. There you go. You want to talk about the scores a little bit?
Yeah, you got to see the Saracens play that first game, and I saw the Valkyries and Denver Black Ice, and both teams were putting up a very good show. Seattle had very good control throughout their game, and in the championship game as well, up until the last 10 minutes or so, they were pretty much running it. They played their championship game against the Chicago North Shore team, and up until about the last 10 minutes, the Saracens were going pretty strong. North Shore almost took it away from them, but Seattle was able to calm it down and kind of hold on to it there. And then we also saw in the same tournament the Life West Gladiatrix. They were just dominant, and personally, I don't think that they're going to be in D2 very long, just because we saw them play against a few different squads, the Ventura County Lady Outlaws, also the Houston Athletic Club, and they were just absolutely dominant. And in the actual finals, they played the same sort of rugby, very hard-nosed. They've got a few Eagles on their squad, so they would bang the ball forward a couple times, spin it out to the back line while the defense was trying to gather itself. And, in the first couple minutes of that championship game, Angela Loma was able to put on a try, and she, as well as Katie Benson, they both had hat tricks in that game. So the Gladiatrix played very strongly in that game. The Seattle Saracens also had a great showing in their championship game.
Talk about a little bit, you talked about hat tricks and things like that, and I'm still, I think I've done 13 games overall, with the games that we did at the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta,
and I'm starting to get a little hang of it now, but I'm nowhere near where you're at, where Marty Watts is at, where Carl Hawkins is at. But I'll tell you something, it's a game, as you mentioned, the way the Seattle Saracens played, and the strategy. When the ball is spun out like that, and you've got people on the overload, and the passing just amazes me. I liken it to a basketball 3-on-2, 2-on-1. Point guard, boom, of course you can't pass forward.
Yeah.
Got to pass back. But some of those dummies that they have
yeah.
are just amazing.
Well, it's the same sort of set play that you see in basketball, hockey, and all those sports where, you're moving fast, so you have to have these plays kind of cataloged before you go in. It's not like football where you stop, set up the whole game or the whole play, and then do the play. You have to kind of move it along just like you do in basketball and hockey. The picks, everything you set up at the moment. So.
And then the recycling of the ball, the rucks, and then you got people getting you off of that ruck, and boy, again, you got the fly halves, the full. There's such strategy to that game, and we'll talk about the kicking aspect in another segment, which amazed me too, because I hadn't seen a great kicker that like we saw with Stephen Jones of the Austin Blacks. We'll talk about that later, but I just think the overall people, I think, and I did too, Aaron, underestimate this game and think, gosh, it's not an American game.
Yeah, it's a hooligan.
Right.
Hooligans play it, so.
I like that, Aaron.
Yeah.
Very, very much not that, okay?
No,
because
not at
if you
all.
look at the background of a lot of these players that play, the educational background is amazing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when we were looking over the different players for the game, some of them were paramedics. One of them was a superintendent down there in Texas. We had businessmen, we had entrepreneurs, we had all sorts of, and that's one of the fun parts about club is that you have all these people, and they're not just some guy they found in a bar playing rugby. These are really strong, charactered individuals with real jobs that come out and they play high caliber rugby as well.
And some critical thinkers, man. I don't think you just mentioned some. That's what amazed me again, learning all about it. Just the overall rugby community, not just in the United States, European, New Zealand. We had Greg Lim on with us from University of Arizona, and that New Zealand accent certainly added quite an allure to our broadcast.
Oh, yeah.
That will do it for the first segment. We'll be back with more of Rugby Saturday Southwest after these messages. Welcome back to Rugby Saturday Southwest. I'm your host, Ed Nunez, along with my co-host, Aaron Rivera. And, it's a good first segment, Aaron. Gosh, we talked, I think for me, competition I love it, man. I don't care what it is, and when you see these guys and women, by the way, there's some outstanding rugby being played, by women as well. When I see competition, I just love it, man. Just love it.
Oh, yeah.
And so, anyway, Marty wanted us to mention that these were the championships.
Oh, yeah. This was the club playoffs, which is basically the amateur, I guess you could call it, playoffs. So these are regular people playing in the National USA Club playoffs. And so the finals, we watched the semifinals down there in Tucson, Arizona, and then the finals were actually played in Glendale, Colorado, Sunday and Saturday. And
yesterday, this past weekend. This is a Monday, and this will air probably Wednesday, but just this past weekend.
Yeah, and there was a lot of really great games played up in Glendale. We had the men's. We had the opportunity to watch a lot of good teams out there play. I got to see those Euless Texans take on the Napa Valley Wine Thieves, and I know you saw Napa Valley and Orange County play.
Boy, to me, that was the game of the tournament for me. Napa Valley up 48-17. And Orange County came storming back, man. And that game, the final was a 48-43.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Absolutely. And,
to me, I'll still get tingles. I saw the Ravens after the game, some of the Orange County. I said, I'm sorry, baby, you just came up a little bit short. But they gave it, they spilled it all, man.
Oh, yeah.
They spilled it all.
And the same thing could be said when Napa Valley took on Euless in the semifinals. Euless ended up not going on to the finals, but Napa Valley played their hearts out. It's just in the end, Euless, those boys tackled strong. Every time that they hit one of the Wine Thieves, they knocked them out. Every single time just driving them. And, we saw throughout that game, Napa Valley was trying to match that intensity because Euless was really bringing the physical game. And you saw Napa start to figure that out and try and bring it up. They lost, unfortunately, due to yellow cards and things like that, and in the end, Euless wanted it a little bit more. And we also got to see St. Louis take on Napa Valley or Orange County in a consolation match, and that was, kind of like you're talking about. They came out of nowhere. Those St. Louis Stormers. Sorry, it's Little Rock, but either way, they came back to win it. And then we also saw some strong play in the second division. We've actually got a Southwest team here, Tempe Old Devils. You've seen them a couple of times.
I did. I was very impressed. And you mentioned, I think one of the things that at least for Orange County, when I saw them play the Napa Valley Wine Thieves, Carl Hawkins, my color commentator and a guy that knows, has been around the game for 30 plus years, was talking about the run and gun action of the Orange County Ravens, trailing 48-17, 5 successive tries. And man, you know what? At the end, if you're the Wine Thieves, you're just hanging on, and they did. But then you mentioned the same kind of game against Euless. And, that's what I mean. I think you just saw some really exciting Tempe Old Devils. Okay, I saw that game, the Tempe Old Devils 27, and the Provo Steelers, who I thought, they came in with some size.
Yeah, they were a very physical team.
But you know what? Tempe just used that finesse, the overloads you mentioned, the passing, the speed on the outside, and Tempe just really took. I was very impressed. And then Tempe, of course, had a large contingent or a decent contingent of fans. They're only 2 hours away from Tucson. So when they scored, would you call it a home field advantage?
Oh, yeah. It's always good to play in your own backyard,
Right.
Makes it a lot easier on your travel. Provo's coming all the way down through Utah to play them, but they had a really strong team going in there. I watched them play against Little Rock, and they have a dominant physical attack. But Tempe is just one of the most phenomenal teams in men's Division II. Actually, they're the most phenomenal team in Division II because they did win the championship this weekend.
As we mentioned, yeah, they did. And when we saw that, again, that's the game that we had Greg Lim on. And, Greg played in the University of Arizona from New Zealand. And just having him on, gosh, I'm still learning about the game. But I thought having him on gave our broadcast a lot of credibility. I think you're very credible. You had Delbert Arnold with you. I want to mention Del. Delbert and you, just like I said, me and Carl, we really, and then with cameraman Josh Brown, producer Josh Brown, Jay Pohl, our cameraman William Powell, Jimmy Medina, I believe, and Savannah Ortega. They worked very, very hard.
Oh, yeah.
And I think at the end of it, we were all...
Produced 8 games in one weekend's a lot.
It really is. But I think one thing, Aaron, you're just starting out in your young broadcasting career, and you're going to be fabulous. You won't forget that. You won't forget it. One day you'll look back on it, and man, we took a crop duster plane down there. We were laughing about that. We made it. We made it back. But you actually flew out there, and for your first, one of your first broadcasting gigs, you got to take a plane, man.
Oh, yeah.
Not bad.
We joked about it being the private jet, Yeah. And it's always nice to get the private jet down to see some crazy games as well. Back to the games we saw in Division I, we had the Blacks versus the Reds.
Oh, I love that game.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite game of the
You want to talk about Stephen Jones there?
Oh, yeah.
For the Austin Blacks,
number
10.
Jones, he leads that squad. He's from England, I believe. And, the Reds had that game going really strong. They had some great play from their forward pack. One of their lock/8-man, Heron, he was just in every single play. And the Blacks were down going pretty deep into it, but it ended up being the kicking game. The Reds just couldn't put it away. They had a few different chances, and their kicker kicked a 50-meter kick about halfway through the game, but as it started winding down, he started missing kicks, and Stephen Jones for the Blacks, he didn't miss his kicks.
Talk about the advantage of a good kicker, Aaron. Talking about the advantage of that, because Stephen Jones, I was amazed by him. I mean, he was a threat from almost anywhere on the field to kick a 3-point.
Well, it's like any other sport. If one of your players isn't doing what you need him to do, you're not going to be able to win. And Stephen Jones was able to use his boot to drive his team to the championships. And they did play the Mystic River Rugby Club, and in the end, Mystic River, they were able to turn it around. The Blacks had the lead going into the second half of the game, But Stephen Jones, who we're talking about, he got yellow carded, and that really turned the
Got about a minute
game
left there,
around.
but keep going. Talk about what
Tempe
happened
Old
there.
Devils.
I want to know what happened with Stephen Jones.
It was a dangerous tackle is what he was called on, and it was about 52, 54 minutes in the game, and that just kind of sank their momentum. It's always tough to play with 14 men. So at that point, it was, that's when Mystic River really started to turn around. And we see Tempe Old Devils from Arizona here in the Southwest. They had their way with the Detroit Tradesmen 54-21, which was a huge game, and we talked about they might be slid up to Division I coming up. And then the Fairfield Yankees, they had a fantastic game against the Euless Texans, where they were able to just hold on to it. It was a high-scoring affair, very tough battle, but in the end, Fairfield did come up strong for Connecticut.
A lot of those teams that we're seeing from Glendale, of course, we saw in Tucson, and you mentioned some of the teams, and Stephen Jones, the number 10. You mentioned about the teams here developing similar players. That's hard to develop. Marty Watson mentioned that. That's very hard to develop players like that, and when you get one, man, you want to hang on to him. And no wonder that the impact of the game when Jones went out, it went again, went downhill for the Blacks for a little while, and Carl Hawkins calls it the sin bin. We're going to take another break. We'll be back with more of Rugby Saturday Southwest after these messages. Welcome back to Rugby Saturday Southwest. I'm your host, Ed Nunez. My co-host, Aaron Rivera, is right here in the middle. Now we're being joined by Marty Watts. And, Marty, when I think of rugby, man, I always think of you. I always think of rugby Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If you could play it every day, you would. And I say those things most affectionately, by the way, because you're a big fan, man. So,
well, if I could turn clock back 40 years ago, I'd be playing. And of course, I've had too many baby back ribs in my lifetime. But believe it or not, I was a young, fast guy in my day. But the fact is, I love this game, and that was the reason why we started this Rugby Saturday. And now we have this TV show, and hopefully we're going to have Rugby Saturday in Tucson, Phoenix, of course, Norman, Oklahoma, and El Paso. So we're going to expand it. But this show is the start of it. And I guess in this segment, we want to talk about the sevens.
Yeah, well, you want to talk about, we mentioned, of course, we have to talk about New Mexico Highlands, and that'll be a little bit later because, again, what they accomplished is incredible. I know we want to talk about that, and we'll talk about the Rugby Sevens. And you might want to mention real quick, Rugby Sevens is different than, people may not get that.
Just so you know, Rugby Sevens is 7 players versus 7, 7 minute halves with a 1 minute halftime. And usually the game is 15 minutes total, And that's what you're going to see in the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. As you know, the United States is going to be defending the gold medal they won in 1924. And the reason why they're playing sevens in the Olympic Games, you just can't really play 15s in a 2 weeks cycle there. So sevens is the only way you can really have a national championship or world championship.
And sevens was basically designed to be a tournament game. I know we talked about it in an earlier show, but basically sevens was designed to be quick, short games so that you could have a whole tournament go down in a weekend, But one
Faster,
of the big
quicker
things,
game.
Oh yeah.
I love watching sevens.
There's a couple different championships for sevens in this country right now.
Unfortunately, we don't have a true national championship in sevens. Now, what you saw on NBC television on Saturday, Sunday was a select 16 of teams, mostly on the East Coast and West Coast, but the best teams in the country weren't there. Now, if you consider BYU, because of their Mormon religion, they don't play on Sunday. They might have been a big factor. Arizona State wasn't in there. St. Mary's, who won the USA Rugby College Championship, and that was held last week in Cary, North Carolina. Different group of people. Some of their best teams weren't there. So, in my opinion, we don't have a true championship. Until we have it, you can. Now, I would say Cal won yesterday. They beat UCLA in the finals, and I really do think Cal is probably the best sevens team. But I'd like to see him play BYU. Could be a different matter. Okay.
And we saw, Arizona teams came up really strong in our sevens. You had Arizona playing this last weekend, and we had ASU playing the weekend before that one, both of them getting to the semifinals.
And well, the Arizona team is coached by Sean Duffy and Jack Arnold. Of course, Delbin Arnold's son. He was a former All-American Arizona.
Wow. I didn't know that.
He was a great football player at El Paso High School, and he is the assistant coach. Now, Arizona went 4-1. They beat Army 20-0. They beat Navy 17-0. They beat St. Joseph's 14-5. They went in the quarterfinals yesterday, and they went in the sudden death, winning on the last play to beat Life College, probably the second best team. They got in the semis and got beat by Cal. They were pretty worn out, but Arizona is from our region. We want to thank them. They had two players, Ben Joseph, Cesar Davilo, who was really good for them. But here's the thing about Arizona. 2 weeks ago, they played our New Mexico Highlands Vatos, who won the National Small College, and we'll get into that in a second. But they played them in the finals in the Celtic 7. The same lineup that beat Army, Navy, St. Joe's, and Life College, the Vatos beat them. In Albuquerque. That just shows you how good this New Mexico Highlands team is. But we want to give a big thank you to Arizona. Sean Duffy is a great coach, and of course, they've been back to the CRC, and this is called the CRC Sevens, and then there's the USA Rugby Sevens. But one of these days, maybe we'll have a true national championship.
That'd be good. That way we could unite it, because, you know, we had two Arizona teams both get semifinals in two different tournaments. It'd be nice to see them play against each other.
But it was a lot of great rugby. I call it champagne rugby, rugby with flair and charisma.
You know,
that's what you saw.
Oh, yeah, you had mentioned champagne rugby, and I know Carl Hawkins had described that, and we'll have to talk about that in another segment. But let's talk about the Vatos real quick, because we're wrapping this segment up. And you know what, Dick Green, what kind of job has he done out there? And you mentioned some of the things about the enrollment, things like that. Talk about the Vatos, man.
Well, here, New Mexico Highlands only have 1,100 kids. They only have 500 boys and 600 girls. So, and Dickie Green is a professor there. He started this team back in '91, and he's built this team into a national power. And some of the players are former New Mexico Highlands football players, other athletes that he's developed. They don't have much of a practice field, but for them to win the National Small College Championship back-to-back, they won it last year, and they have this one guy named Kevon Williams, who was a great wide receiver in college football. In the last 2 years, he's dominated rugby. He's signing a professional contract, I think, this week. And by the way, at 3 o'clock on Monday, so this show's being taped, but they're having a parade in Las Vegas, big celebration by the university. Now remember, the last time New Mexico Highlands won any national championship was in 1968 NAIA baseball. Okay, so
how big is this a moment for Las Vegas, New Mexico?
Well, I hope
huge. It really is.
It's just too bad Tiny Martinez is not alive, because Tiny was the patron saint there at that town. He ran everything, but he would be having a big celebration, the whole Martinez family. But what a great victory for this little school in Las Vegas to go back to Philadelphia and win the national championship.
I think one of the things that I want to mention for me, you know, we get all these other names, Mystic River, Celtic, you know, the nicknames, Vatos, Wine Thieves. I love the Vatos, man. I love the nickname because that's so New Mexico. We're a bunch of Vatos, man. You know, and people may have a different connotation to that, but I love it. You know, who are these Vatos? You know, people are probably wondering when they got them on the schedule, who are these Vatos? So what does that mean?
So what does it mean in Spanish, Ed?
But Vatos just, I think it's just a guy, you know, Vatos, you know, I don't think there's any meaning in
it's one of the unique names in rugby, the
right,
Vatos.
But you know what, like I said, I think it's just, you know, one more question, Marty. We've got about 30 seconds left. Can we get Coach Green on the show? I hope we can.
Well, we're gonna get him on here. And of course, you know, Dick's a former Albuquerque Aardvark. He's in our Aardvark Hall of Fame. But what a great coach he is. And I'll tell you this. We want to get Sean Duffy from Arizona on here, Jack Arno. We have so many great teams in our region, and of course the teams in Oklahoma. Oklahoma did make it to the College Sevens. They didn't get to the quarter, but they had a good season this year. So this is what it's all about, our region, the Southwest.
Guys, we're going to have to wrap it up. For my co-host, Aaron Rivera, for Marty Watts, I'm Ed Nunez. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rugby Saturday Southwest.